Okay, class, now it's time to focus on the fun stuff that I've been teasing for the last couple of days. So today, what I have been calling the Sweet 16, because it's the 16 literary devices that we're going to look at and cover, is actually 17. So we're just going to call this the Sweet 16 plus 1. It doesn't matter which one is the one, but extra, but it's important that you know them. So when we're looking at this, all of these can be found on page 78 to 79, or at least 13 of them can be found on pages 78 to 79. And these will all be in videos of some kind over the next week, and we will have a quiz a week from, it's basically next Friday's quiz will be on all 17 of these. So keeping that in mind, that is August 28th. So that is your quiz for that day. So I've broken these up into 2 columns for you. They are in alphabetical order in each column. The ones in green are the ones that are not in your book. So yes, I know it's really weird not to have simile in your book, but it's there. So the first column we have is diction, which is this idea of word choice. So the author chose to put that word to have that extra meaning. These we are not covering today. I will be going through those later and breaking them up into smaller videos. What we're going to focus on today is part of the syntax column, so this idea of word order. So looking at this list here, we're actually going to cover 5 of these here in what we're going to look at and discuss today. So looking at what's first, we have anaphora. So my suggestion to you when you're looking at your notes is in your notes you write the definition. Yes, the definitions for these are in the textbook as well, but it's good if it's in your notes as well. The more you write it, the more you will actually learn about it, and the more it will be stuck in your head. So anaphora is repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive phrases, clauses, or lines. Successive means in a row. So keeping that idea of in a row is important. Anaphora you see a lot in poetry, but we've also seen it a lot the last couple of days when we've been talking about the several speeches that we've looked at. Both the Winston Churchill speech, and we've seen it, I think, a little bit in the Ralph Ellison essay. So looking at this example here, let me grab my pen. Make it a color so it actually stands out. Okay, so looking at this, when we look at this sentence, she didn't speak, she didn't stand, she didn't even look up when we came in. What you're looking for is the repetition of the successive phrases, but focus specifically on this idea of it being at the beginning of the phrase. So it's the very first part that repeats. Now here, if we look here, we see a she, and we see a she. So we'll underline all of those, but that's not the only thing that repeats. It says word or phrase. So in actuality, it's she didn't, she didn't, she didn't. Excuse my lines, these suck when I'm working with a mouse. Okay, so that is anaphora. If you go back to the Winston Churchill speech, when he uses the victory in that repetition, and that fourth and final paragraph, that definitely fits in with that idea there. Okay, on the other side of anaphora is this one called antistrophe. This is not in your book. Another word for it, and the only reason I'm giving you this idea or giving you the second word of epistrophe is because that sometimes on the AP test they will give you one of these, not both of these. So you need to know both names. So it might be in one question they call it antistrophe, and 5 questions later they call it epistrophe. So it's important that you know both names. I will call it antistrophe. So just keeping that in mind. So repetition of a word or phrase at the ending of successive phrases, clauses, or lines. So this is the opposite of anaphora. So here we're looking for the end phrase. We're not looking for the beginning, we're looking for the end. I know I'm being repetitive, but that's important. Okay. So looking at this one. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man and the quote actually continues. So we're looking for the end, not the beginning. So with the when, the I, those aren't what we're looking for. And in fact, you could say the I's is an anaphora, but what we're looking for in this case, for the example, we're looking for the antistrophe. So we're looking for the ending. So you're going to look before punctuation marks, and we have several of those in here. So here, in fact, we would have a child, you have the A over here, the child there, and a child here. Now, keeping in mind here, this being the end aspects is important. So the author is putting more emphasis on the end of their phrases, whereas the author up here with the anaphora is putting the emphasis more on the beginning of their phrases. Okay, and a sentence can have more than one. So this sentence, even though technically it has an antistrophe, and that's the example I'm using, it also has an anaphora with the I's. Okay, scroll up. Okay, a syndeton. Now this one is in your book. It is on page 79, and looking at this, omission of conjunctions between phrases, clauses, or words. So the author chose not to put in the conjunction. When I show you the example, it will sound and feel really weird for you because you were used to having a conjunction. You are used to giving a list and at the end of the list putting in the word and. That is the most common way it's used. So if I were to say something along the lines of, I like to play volleyball, basketball, and hockey, that would be your and. Now the idea is here with an asyndeton is you don't use the and. So you use something more along the lines of this. We went to the store to buy pens, paper, notebooks. This right here in between paper and notebooks is where you would normally see an and. But in this case, because the author on purpose chose with their word choice to put the idea of not putting putting the conjunction here, in actuality, they're using an asyndeton. It is grammatically correct. I know it's a little weird, but it is grammatically correct. So keeping in mind this idea is it has no conjunctions in between the words that it's listing. Now looking at the other aspect here is polysyndeton. So a polysyndeton is the opposite of an asyndeton. This one is not in the textbook, so this is one I'm adding. So making sure you definitely get the definition for this in your notes. It's the use of conjunctions in between each phrase, clause, or set of words. So this is every single time where I have these holes would be a conjunction. So let's look at the sample here. We went to the store to buy pens and papers and notebooks. So it does sound repetitive because it's using an and in between each one, but that's the idea that the author put that there on purpose to get you in that structural aspects. So they chose this structure on purpose, and because they chose this structure on purpose, it fits into the syntax aspect. So here we would have this idea of pens and paper and notebooks. Okay, so those are 4 of the 5. So the last one is what we call a chiasmus. The CHI is actually pronounced with chi, not a chi. Now this is in the textbook, they call it antimetaboly, which I don't understand why they call it that, but on the AP tests they call it chiasmus. So I will refer to it that way for the entire year. So my preference is that you actually go into your textbook on page 78, you cross out the word antimetaboly, and you just replace it with chiasmus. If you want to do it with whiteout, I don't care. You want to just draw a line, that's your choice. Now, this one is a little fun. I think it's fun, especially if you're a math person, because this is where we get to start playing with math concepts. Repetition of words in reverse order. Okay, so let's look at this math problem. This is the visual of chiasmus. So in a sentence, we start with an A, and we keep going along, and then we have a B, and then usually we have a punctuation mark, like a comma or a semicolon or a colon, and then we reverse the order. So then we go B plus A. Okay, now you're probably really confused, but let me show you the first example. Don't sweat the petty things, and don't pet the sweaty things. So if we look at this, the blues would be the A, and the oranges would be the B. So the main concept here that we're talking about to begin with, that we mentioned first, is the sweat. And then we mention the petty. So on this side we have the A, we have the B. And then we start to reverse it, and we have a punctuation mark to show the change here. So here we have the B, and we bring the pet to the front. And here we have the A, and we end with the A. So it's reversing it. There is actually a mathematical property that follows this ideal. So keeping that in mind, it helps you to look at this from the aspect of a formula. I actually do have one on top of my board too, that if you look in class on Monday, you might notice that it's a little wood plaque that sits there on top of one of my whiteboards. Okay, the other example we have here is, let me move it, is this little comic here. So this little picture here, readers don't need to write, but writers do need to read. If you look at this, the little picture actually shows you and illustrates this idea of a reader actually reading. If you're reading something, you don't actually have to write, is what it's saying. So the reader would be our A, and writes would be our B. Now here on the other side, looking at the picture, it shows this idea of writers do need to read. Keeping that in mind, a writer has to be willing to go back and read their work and make sure that they have everything that they need. Okay, so we have this A plus B over here, and the but here is our equals. So, and you could actually technically put a comma here too, but the but kind of takes the place of that comma. And we would have the B plus the A on that side. So that is chiasmus. This is the fun one because I like to play around with the words and have fun with them, but it definitely fits in with that idea. Okay, homework. What I want you to do in your notebook, and we're going to use this in class on Monday when we start after we do our bell ringer or our journal, we're going to go over this on the board and look at the examples and see what each of these are. Now I have 6 of them here, so I'm going to end the video quickly after it, but I suggest that you pause, like I know you've been really good at, and write down the 6 sentences and label them. So you're going to label them. You only are using the 5 that we've discussed, and remember I've already said that it can be used more, you can have more than one in a sentence. Now since there are 6 sentences options, or 6 sentences that I'm giving you, it does mean that something is obviously used more than once, but it doesn't mean that everything is only used once. Okay, so there might be something more in there and something might not even be used. So let's go ahead and have those up on the screen. I will move the camera out of the way for you as well so that you have that, but keeping in mind this idea of what they are. Make sure you write them down, make sure you look at them, make sure you label them properly. It might help to underline things or circle things, but be prepared for this on Monday in our opening discussion. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.